Howdy folks, Justin here, and we are back with another brand new expansion card. I say expansion because we found out yesterday that it's not Frostfall, which was a really cool name for the expansion. It is instead Frostspark. So, that's happened. But here we go. This is the brand new one, and this is a pretty exciting one. Green Pact Ambusher was revealed by Warrior 7. And Green Pact Ambusher is a really interesting card. It is the most straightforward of the cards revealed so far. You know, every time reveal season comes around, some people struggle to appropriately review the power level of cards. You know, which makes sense. You know, you never see them in action. Green Pact Ambusher is not a card that requires a whole lot of like examination before you're like, wow, this is a pretty powerful effect. So for 2 magic, you get a 4/1 with Prophecy and Guard, which is already going to see play based on those stats alone in some archetypes. I'm thinking Prophecy Battle Mage. Although the Guard is not ideal, it's still, you know, a fantastic card to hit on a Prophecy in a lot of situations. But the really interesting part here is the additional text. At the end of your opponent's turn, if they have a full lane and Green Pact Ambushers in your hand, summon her to that lane. This is pretty cool. This is, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this pretty simple. Because there are two obvious things to do with this card. I want to get those out of the way before I start talking a little bit more about the design. First, let me start at the beginning. I started searching for Telvanni, but I'm looking for conscription. Alright, Telvanni is conscription. Fills lanes, right? So if you have these in your hand, bam, you drop it in there, and there you go. You have a 4/1 guard, which is, you know, on its own, not bad. Now, recently, we've seen an emergence of an archer deck that uses a Bog Lurcher, Borg, resistance is futile, along with Unstoppable Rage and a improvised weapon to give it breakthrough to kill a player on turn 12 after on turn 11 their opponent plays conscription. This is a pretty cool idea. What this card does is, again, combos with, this is the other card then that's important here, Unstoppable Rage, right? It's a pretty obvious combo. An Unstoppable Rage on a Green Pact Ambusher from hand on turn 10 can clear a lane, but if your opponent is also just like moving a little bit more quickly than that, and you can drop this from your hand onto the field on turn 8 or turn 7 with the ring, or turn 6 if you have some completed contracts, you can just Unstoppable Rage a lane completely out of existence. Now, it is a 4/1 and not a 9/1, so the chances of OTKing are a little more limited, but it's still a really powerful effect. This is the most obvious counter to any existing strategy that we've seen so far, and fits in line with the cards we've seen these are all very specifically, like, there's no, like, this is just a good card because of its stat line cards, right? You know, traditionally there are a lot of cards that are just very powerful because they're above the curve. For instance, Bleak Coast Troll. There is no Bleak Coast Troll so far, right? Like, Bleak Coast Troll doesn't inspire anybody to do anything new. It just inspires you to beat people down. Green Pact Ambusher is the simplest, most straightforward of the cards we've seen so far, but still fascinatingly complicated. Now, what else can you do with this? Well, there's a couple things you can do with it. If you're really looking to meme and you want to meme hard in Warrior, I would recommend, Insulin Pump is going off, I would recommend using Galen because look, a 4/1 is great. You know, you can't fight a 4/1. I enjoy a 4/1 as much as anybody. But if you shuffle some more additional copies of this in your deck, and they are 7/4s, obviously your Unstoppable Rage shenanigans get much more interesting. And it's totally possible to get your opponent to 21 life, have 3, you know, buffed Green Pact Ambushers in your hand, and then drop them all at once to kill your opponent. I think that's a pretty funny way to do it. I think Galening this card is just going to be hilarious. And pretty good, too, right? I mean, like, it's one of the highest stat lines you're going to be able to get on a guard that you can Galen in, so it's pretty cool. Additionally, what I like about Green Pact Ambusher is that it creates this interesting tension, right? There are going to be a lot of times where it's not appropriate to play this on Prophecy. Like, you could play it when it triggers as a prophecy to block your opponent from having lethal. That's totally reasonable play. But if your opponent triggers it as a prophecy and they have a lane full of creatures and they're not going to swing for lethal this turn, but you can swing for lethal next turn because it's some kind of desperation thing for them, it's easy. You just wait, you put it in your hand, drag it to your hand, which you can do with prophecies. You don't have to play them. And you drop Green Pact Ambusher onto the board, and then bam, you win. So in some ways, this is the Green Lightning Bolt. Because it is not, unlike the other 4-1 in red with Prophecy, 4-2, it is not, it's not mandatory that you play it for Prophecy if you know, in order to attack with it. You know, if your opponent has a Firebolt, they may be swinging Breaking Runes thinking, well, I have enough removal in my hand, and I'm in desperation mode, I have to kill my opponent. My opponent's not running Lightning Bolt. This is what I got to do. This is my play. I got to break these runes and win over the course of 2 turns. Green Pact Ambusher, there are niche situations where, despite having guard, it's going to be more likely to kill your opponent than a Greystone Ravager will be, which is definitely super interesting. I had to give a shout out too to the Green Pact Ambusher art, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, the surface level uses are Unstoppable Rage and Combating Conscription. Now that said, I do think that this card is kind of a trap, okay? I feel like on the back of being a 4-power prophecy creature, this is going to see play in more decks than it's necessarily going to end up needing to see play in, right? Because the guard is a huge trap, right? Like, having guard in this makes it much less flexible as an aggressive creature than Greystone Ravager is. You know, you can't coin this out, ring this out, complete a contract this out, there you go, on turn 1, and not face a little bit of risk that you wouldn't if you were just dropping your Greystone Ravager in the Shadow Lane like every Prophecy Battle Mage player I've ever played against does. Now that said, that's not always the right play, but it is still a really, you know, it's worth keeping in mind that it does have the guard feature there, and it's, I think, going to come up more often than people would expect that it's not a great prophecy. Now, am I going to get killed by this thing a half dozen times in the first week this expansion's out? Absolutely, because it's going to be everywhere. Because, like I was saying earlier about the power level of cards and evaluating new cards, Green Pact Ambusher is pretty obviously very strong in a lot of situations. So I expect it to be the one that is most quickly adopted. And, you know, on the surface, as a 4-power aggro, 4-power 2-drop in red, it fits into aggro shells pretty easily. And aggro decks are usually some of the most powerful decks after new content comes out because, you know, you have the brewers who are like, oh, I'm going to Galen 3 copies of Green Pact Ambusher into my deck, and wait till I draw all 3, then kill my opponent when they have a full lane. You have those guys, you know, blessed though they may be. But then you have the people who are like, well, I'm going to kick the crap out of everybody who's playing these super unrefined, ridiculous lists and trying out new cards that may end up not being, you know, competitively viable. Green Pact Ambusher is the kind of card they're going to see from the new expansion and may be inclined to put in their deck. So this is definitely a card that you're going to play around quite a bit in the first few weeks of the new expansion. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're hopping on the ladder here in the early game. There are, you know, a variety of other things that you can do with this card. It's, like I said, it's pretty straightforward, despite having a really fascinating ability. It's the first, like, trap card, right? Like, prophecies are sort of already, like, trap cards, but it's uninterruptible, right? Like, if you have this in your hand, your opponent's full lane, it just happens. That shit just happens, and there you go, you have a 4-1 guard. Now, a 4-1 guard doesn't trade very well, so if you plan on using this defensively, you know, I guess my concern, like, it's unreliable, right? Like, a 4-1 guard's going to trade with 1 creature, unless you strike for lethal with it. I mean, there's just so many, like, fascinating, like, little tensions in this card that really make me think. I have to admit, like, I'm not immediately keen on, like, interesting things to do with it besides the hilarious Galen thing, which is actually going to be harder to pull off than the, giving Wildfire Dragon charge and lethal and, putting Brotherhood Sanctuaries into play. This is going to require more of your deck. Like, I ran the numbers. Like, you're more likely to pull that combo off and assemble those cards than you are to Galen this and then draw all 3 copies. But no immediate things are coming to mind. I do think that, and I talk about this deck a lot, the mid-range Life Gain Crusader archetype that has not done well lately. Dawnstar Healer being a backbone of that archetype historically. Is a sort of deck that could make use of this. because of its cheat into play ability. You know, the deck sometimes struggles against go wide strategies, and this is a free creature then. Although, again, a creature that trades with an Imperial Grunt. And because one of the things that deck does is pivot to racing, and having an opponent who fills their lane and then dropping this for free gives you the tempo that you need to trigger your Dawnstar Healers and your Boomer Profiteers and stuff like that to race and win. So it does fit into that archetype pretty nicely. That's the Fantastic Fours Crusader type thing. That was really good last year. But yeah, it is what it is. As far as arena applications, I always like to touch on that because I love arena. It's a reasonable beat stick, but like I think you'll be surprised at how often this just does absolutely no damage to your opponent. Like a 4/1 guard is, you know, it may as well be a 1/1 guard most of the time for defensive purposes. So, you know, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on arena. It's an epic, so you're not going to see it a lot anyway, but I'm not particularly interested in this card as an arena card, and I'm pretty unlikely to draft it. Although Prophecies are at a premium in arena, this is one of the worst Prophecies you can hit, frankly. Although in arena, I will say, it is almost certainly, because of the importance of playing for the board there versus constructed where it's not nearly as important anymore, I will take a Green Pact Ambusher over a Greystone Ravager if I was somehow presented with a choice between a common and an epic. That basically sums up my thoughts on this card. I love the design of it. I love seeing these super meta cards, right? Like, not like meta like this is the game's meta, but meta like this is a response to the meta. This is the world we live in, so these are the cards we're being presented. I am fascinated in that regard. And like I said, of all the cards revealed so far, I anticipate this is the one I'm going to see the most in the first week. And then over time, we're probably still going to see quite a bit of it, actually. But we'll see a lot less of it once people kind of realize that it's good. It's a powerful card. It's not great. And unless you're running Unstoppable Rage, it's a pretty poor answer to Conscription. Mechanically, though, what I love about this most is the new design space being explored here. And the willingness to quickly show a response to the meta. See you on the ladder.